Well, hello, everyone. I'm Lauren Culp. I'm the publisher and CEO at CUInsight.com, and thank you so much for tuning into our quick discussion today on taking care of yourself and leading during challenging times. Joining me today are Amy Downs, the President and CEO of Allegiance Credit Union, and Leo Ardine, the President and CEO of United Teletech Financial Federal Credit Union. Amy, Leo, hi. Thank you for joining me.
Hi, Lauren.
Hi.
How are you both doing?
Good to be here. Good to see people.
Starting week 2.
Well, these I know are really challenging times, and many folks, myself included, are stressed and anxious and worried. And we talk a lot about what we can do for our members and for our team. And those are really important things. But something that's often overlooked, I think, is taking care of yourself during really challenging times. And that, in my opinion, and we'll get to this, is really crucial to be a good leader through troubling times. And so I want to talk with you both about that today. And what's really significant about the crisis that we're going through is that it seems to sort of be this marathon versus a sprint. No one knows exactly how long the effects will last. And so that makes self-care, I would say, even more important. And so I'm glad we're able to have both of you talk about that with us today. So I know you've both been on the CUInsight Experience podcast and both shared your stories. And I know personally I've been really inspired by both of your stories. So let's dive right in. Leo, I know you do a lot of work around mindfulness and emotional intelligence, and this is a really difficult time for so many people. So can you share with us, how do you think mindfulness can really help during a time like this?
Sure, I'm glad to do that. And thanks for having me on, Lauren. It's good to be back. I had a couple things that I wanted to bring up to people. I think as we look at emotional intelligence, it really focuses on 4 areas: ourselves, well, actually 2, ourselves and others, right? And as we become more aware of ourselves, how that might inform how we interact with others, using that empathy for ourselves, that understanding to say, oh, I may be feeling nervous right now about what's happening and how long it's taking. Maybe some of my peers or my coworkers are feeling the same way. How might that shape how I lead during this time, right? And so that whole sense of emotional intelligence then is driven by this sense of self-awareness, right? How are we able to know what's going on unless we're thinking about that, right? So sometimes we go through a crisis and we're good leaders and everybody turns to us, but we do it mindlessly, instinctually. And that's great to get people out of a house when it's burning, but over a long term, it starts to wear us down because the chemicals that our body puts out there to help us, cortisol, adrenaline, so we can run really fast and get away, or we could get in a fight. Those are really helpful in the moment, but over the long term, they tend to take us down. So when you start to talk about self-care, activities that can help us kind of unwind those chemicals are really useful. And a couple that I recommend that I've learned through my mindfulness practices are just breath work, right? Slowing our breathing down so that our heart rate reduces. That sends signals to the brain like, hey, if my heart rate's reduced, maybe this isn't a threat. And then maybe our brains can recruit resources from other parts, from instead of the old brain to our executive function up in the prefrontal cortex. And that's really what we're trying to do here, is to stay away from that fight or flight and try to move into the sense of, oh, I can think this through, I can take a moment and notice what's going on and then choose how I want to respond as opposed to react. So that, mindfulness helps us do that. It gives us that break so that we can pause, notice what's happening, and then choose how to go forward.
Great, thank you. That's honestly, starting with the breath work, that's something I hadn't even really considered. So for somebody who hasn't ever done something like that, do you have any resources or good strategies to start managing that?
We can do one right here, and I can share links with you after the fact. So when we do breath work, what we're trying to do is just control our breathing. That's really what it is. And we strive for about 6 breaths a minute, 1 every 10 seconds, and in and out. And some ways that we do this is, and those of you who have a yoga practice or a meditation practice may know this, it's a long, deep breath in for 3, and then a slow, gentle exhalation for 6. Pause at the bottom, breathe in again for 3, and then out again for 6. Very slow, gentle. And so we do this a few times 5 times in a row for a minute, maybe just 6 breaths in a minute, in and out, that full cycle. But the intake is always quicker and full, right into your belly, up through your chest. And then the exhale is much longer and much slower. Sometimes people do a breath like they pretend that they take a deep breath in and they pretend they're breathing out of a straw. It accomplishes the same thing. And what you'll notice is as that exhale happens, you feel a settling in through your chest and right in your belly. You'll feel it. You'll be like, oh, now I can sit. I can feel my butt in the chair. Like I can really feel myself. And what happens in that moment, if you do that a few times during the day, is that your body, your brain actually relaxes and starts to move into the prefrontal cortex where you can think again. And that's what we need, right? Because we get paid to make really good decisions. And if
Right.
we're flooded with information and we're flooded with COVID-19 and all this stuff, you can't really even think. And so the breath work, for a minute, 3 or 4 times a day, or when you're really stressed out, or just before you get into deal with your family, it's a great time to do that breath work because it'll settle you into yourself. I hope that helps.
That definitely helps me. Well, Amy, I don't know if you've ever done some breath work yourself, but I know you do have firsthand experience with a different huge crisis. So for those who haven't heard your story, could you give us sort of a quick summary of what happened and what you took away from that?
Yes, I sure will. But I did just practice my
Good for
breathing.
you.
So, and now I'm really conscious about it all of a sudden. I'm like,
Good. That's
am I
great.
breathing in? How many seconds?
It helps before you go on camera too. You're like, okay, I can breathe.
Right.
Although I feel like, I can see it the next time I'm in a high stress meeting and all of a sudden I'm starting to, have really specific breathing. It's going to be a signal to everybody. Uh-oh. But yes, I did go through a crisis with my credit union and individually in 1995 when the building that I worked in, the Alfred P. Murr building, was blown up. And our credit union was on the 3rd floor. So my desk was actually front and center of the building. And I ended up being buried alive basically for about 6.5 hours. And I didn't lose consciousness. And so our credit union, okay, that's traumatic enough, right? Just right there. But our credit union, we were a single sponsored credit union. We served the federal employees in that building. So in 1 minute, we lost 18 of our 33 coworkers. They were killed. Wow. 5 of us were critically injured, and the rest, obviously very traumatized. And our business model changed overnight because we lost our building. Much like a lot of people have lost their buildings right now because we're working from home, we're trying to make it work by having, fewer people in the office and closing our lobbies. And so, we really had to navigate a really difficult situation for our size credit union. We were 70 million at the time. When I look back now, I'm really shocked that we did survive because it would have been completely understandable to have merged with someone else and not to have made it. But I'm really proud of the fact that we're now, 4 times the size, 4 times stronger than we were 25 years ago. So instead of just, we're going to hunker down and just survive this thing, we went into it very intentional. We're not going away. Like, we are going to do more than survive. And we did. And so that's, personally having gone through my own personal trauma, and then also with my business as well, the credit union,
Right. So Amy, can you share a little bit about going through that experience? Obviously so traumatizing and such a hard experience. And now you're the president and CEO of the credit union. How has going through that back in 1995 changed how you lead now during a crisis?
So it has changed a lot. I actually called our CEO that we had at the time, and I said, when you're growing up, your parents do certain things, and later, if you ever become a parent, you catch yourself doing that thing your mom did, and it might be good or bad, who knows? But you're like, oh my gosh, I'm turning into my mother. And I've noticed like you were speaking to Leo a minute ago, sometimes it's instinctively, that we act as leaders. And I didn't realize how much I absorbed of what I saw our leadership do back then. So I think having walked through that and watched a lot of it, there's some that's natural, but there's a lot that's not natural, and it's intentional. And so I have to sit down every morning and be very intentional about my day and how I'm communicating with the staff, because that is the most important thing for me. When I went through our crisis with the credit union, was you need to know what's going on. You know, everybody's scared. Nobody knows what's going to happen. So this is a time to over communicate, in my opinion. So that's what I took away. I think the most from having gone through that in 95 is make sure and communicate with your employees, because it tells them you care. You know, communicate a lot, and particularly let them see you. You know, if you haven't already gone out and gotten your Zoom account, you know, you need to do that.
Right. And Zoom
Amy, you're right on the money with that over communicating too. I feel like that is so important to provide people with a sense of clarity around what's going on today, what's going to happen tomorrow, and how is everybody? That sense, and you know, 3/4 of my staff is now remote, and so they're all like, where is everybody? You know, so that sense of connection that we do, and every morning I do, it's National such and such day. So today I think is National Doctor Day. How appropriate. And I send a little note around to them just saying, hey, here's a chance for us to start with gratitude for these people who are serving. And then boom, we move right into shout outs to people, connection, and this is what's coming. So you're right on the money with that clarity, communication, consistency of it, and considering what they need. So important, so important.
Yeah, we have several things. We actually are having for our employees who are of faith and wanted to have a little 5-minute prayer huddle in the morning. So we have a video meeting for that, and then we also have virtual happy hour. So you know, like give us the faith, give us wine, give us chocolate. I don't know how to do virtual chocolate yet, but all the things, you know, that we need to connect. We also have a just an employee Facebook page that's not an official page. This is the page where post all the memes, all the movies we need to binge watch. You know, I mean, it's just, we're trying to connect. Obviously, you have all the professional things that you need to communicate that are happening, but we don't see each other in the hallway anymore. So we need opportunity to connect otherwise as well.
Right.
And when you think about resilience, you know, that connection is one of the pieces of resilience that's so important to us. You know, so is perspective taking. So, you know, when we sit there and we say, my goodness, we're all stuck at home. My CFO, he's a great guy, Francis James. He'll always say, yeah, we're stuck at home, but we're safe. Mm-hmm. You know, we're safe. Nobody's sick. We have all these other things to be grateful for.
That's right. And that's a good self-care practice right there, is having a gratitude journal, you know, or just a way that where you stop. I do it in the morning, and just some people do count to 3, some it's 5, but just list off, you know, those things that you're grateful for today, because we all have things we can be grateful for.
True, it's true.
So, and we've touched on this now, but, you know, so many of us who are navigating this situation are leading others. And can you talk a little bit about how do you think self-care is really linked to effective leadership? Do you think one really impacts the other?
Oh, I absolutely do. It's huge. If you are not taking care of yourself, you can't take care of other people. You know, you really have to be coming at this with all of the energy. This is when you've got to show up your best self. And so for me, movement is huge. And so I start my morning out. Usually I ride the bike 30, 45 minutes. Right now, it's at least an hour every morning, because I need that movement. I need my body to be engaged and my mind to be engaged. And for me, that's something that I can do that helps me bring my best self to work.
I agree with that. My team knows, they can tell I'm getting crunchy if I haven't taken care of myself. And so, you know, I have a few areas too. Exercise is important to me. It's like I have to burn off that bad energy. Diet is really important to me. Rest, seeing my kids, which I can't do right now, which is, you know, except through space time, which is hard. Being outside, which right now where we're, you know, in stay at home, that's hard to do as well. So sometimes you have to load up on other things. And for me, that's yoga and meditation. That helps a lot as far as trying to settle me down and focus on what other people need. But I agree with you. Those things are so important because if you don't take care of yourself, you're right. You don't have it in the bucket to give to somebody else.
Right.
I
That's
like that. Don't be crunchy. Don't
Yeah, really. I
right.
was crunchy this morning. I could
I
tell.
like that.
Yeah.
But it's true. We each have something we know that is what we need to do for ourselves that has that bit of joy or whatever it is, and we've got to make sure we're doing that right now.
Right. Well, and I would say for a lot of folks, you mentioned this, Leo, that, some of the things that we wish that we could do that would help fill up our bucket, we can't do so. Being able to load up other things more, Amy, you doing more bike riding now because of the whole situation. That's a great piece of advice.
Virtual bike ride, I might add. Although
Okay,
we're out in the country, so I have been able to get out a little bit on the country roads. But yeah.
One thing too that I've found for leaders is that when we are working, we're spending so much time making decisions, helping people solve problems that we get to this state of decision fatigue. And so when I work with my coaching clients, sometimes I'll suggest to them, what can you do where you can follow somebody else's instructions? Like make something, use a recipe, make something where you don't really have to think that through. You just need to put a cup of flour in, a cup of milk, and soon enough you got pancakes. Or if you, I also knit. So like knitting and purling, that's so simple because it's knit 2, purl 2, and suddenly you got a hat. But that sense of moving from like constant decision making into something that's different, challenging the other side of our brain so that all of a sudden we're making something, creating something, drawing something, painting something, whatever it is so helpful to sustaining a sense of balance. And as this is going to be prolonged, they're saying in New Jersey, we'll probably be here home till the end of April, middle of May. Trying to figure out what that structure is going to be can help us sustain a sense of energy and purpose through this whole time.
The thing that I said often after a few years after the bombing was I really saw how true it is that you can't control everything that happens to you, but you can always control how you choose to respond. And I think in this environment, that's what we're saying is we maybe can't control what's going on right now, but we can control our breathing. We can control being mindful, having activity, yoga, whatever, cardio, whatever the things are that you can control to take care of you, you've got to do that. And you can control your communication to your team. All the things you can control, be very intentional about those right now.
Right. So during a crisis like this, Leo, you alluded to this, we get paid to make good decisions. And do you have any suggestions for our viewers on how to make decisions, especially under pressure like this?
Yeah, I think we all have our own style. And so all I could suggest are ways to supplement that. And one of the things that I try to do is, we've got a plan that we're executing on it and we have to tweak that. And so I think that's different when we're all in this. We just have to tweak what's there. But when we're starting to make decisions that really impact people's lives, the question of what would serve really comes to mind for me. And I can't really evaluate that unless I'm in a good place. So getting settled so that I could really think through both heart and head what's needed here. And then the other thing is to get the right people in the room with me or on the phone with me and using all of the information that I have available to me to then listen to what my heart's saying and what's in alignment with our values, my personal values. That's what I do. And so, whether it comes to paying team through this time or furloughing them, whatever people are going to do to make, a decision, for us, it comes down to what would best serve the credit union, what would best serve the members, what would best serve our team members. So that's kind of what I do. So settling, considering everything, and then asking what would best serve and going forward from there.
That's good. Very good.
Do you have any other thoughts, Amy? Or
I'm over here. Amen. Preach. That's
right.
really good. I feel the same. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, thank you both so much for sharing some time today. If you had to pick one thing for folks watching to take away from this conversation and start doing right away, what would your one sort of most critical piece of advice be?
Amy, do you want to go first?
I think for me, it would be, I would want people just to remember that they can control how they're choosing to show up right now every day. Even if it's in their house, they can choose how they're showing up. So just remember that.
And I think I came, you know, when I was thinking about this, I came down to some questions, right? Because we're going to get through this. It's just when.
Right.
And so that sense of trying to create a resilience is asking questions about how do I want to remember myself during this time? Right? Do I want to be that frenetic person, or do I want to be somebody who's calm that somebody can look to as an example? And then what are you looking forward to? And what does that look like? So, you know, maybe it's not going to be May 31st, or maybe it's going to be Easter, who knows? But what are you looking forward to doing with people to celebrate at that time, and give yourself something to look forward to whenever that time may be? So, and breathe. Make sure you
Great
breathe.
advice. Yes, and breathe. Keep breathing. Well, thank you both so much for sharing your time with us during what is a very busy and easily chaotic time. For anyone watching, if you'd like to hear more from Amy or Leo's stories, I'll link to their podcast episodes here as well, so you can hear even more from them. Thank you both so much, Amy, Leo. It's been great to talk to you. Wishing you all the best as we navigate this situation. And thank you everyone out there for watching today. Take care.
Thanks.